Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world. Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, March 11th, 2024. We're covering the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. We thank our friends at Fluor for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. This month, the waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Located in southeast New Mexico, about 26 miles east of Carlsbad, WIPP was constructed for disposal of defense-generated transuranic, or TRU-waste. It received its first shipment from Los Alamos National Laboratory 25 years ago this month, on March 26, 1999. WIPP is the nation's only repository for the permanent disposal of transuranic waste. TRU-waste can be found at facilities throughout the DOE complex. It is composed of man-made radioactive materials that are heavier than uranium. That is, they have an atomic number greater than 92. Here's more.
Congress authorized WIPP in 1979, and the facility was constructed during the 1980s. The 1992 Land Withdrawal Act limited WIPP to defense-generated TRU-waste. WIPP received its first TRU-waste shipment in 1999 from Los Alamos National Laboratory. The DOE and its contractors and subcontractors directly employ more than 1,500 people at the WIPP site and at the DOE's Carlsbad field office. WIPP's economic activity is bolstered by spending on two major capital projects: the $475 million Safety Significant Confinement Ventilation System and the $240 million utility shaft. Millions of dollars in contracts have also been awarded for 15 general plant projects, such as a new firewater system. There are two categories of TRU-waste: contact handled and remote handled. Remote handled TRU-waste emits more penetrating radiation than contact handled waste, and therefore must be shielded and handled with machinery and robotic equipment. Contact handled waste, once sealed inside the disposal container, can be safely handled by workers under controlled conditions. Approximately 96% of the waste destined for WIPP is contact-handled TRU-waste. Transuranic waste, which has an atomic number greater than uranium on the periodic table, generally consists of clothing tools, rags, and other contaminated items with plutonium, and other man-made radioisotopes that have atomic numbers greater than 92 on the periodic table of elements. WIPP is regulated by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, New Mexico Environmental Department, and Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the Mine Safety and Health Administration.
We'll have more after this from Fluor. TRU-waste is disposed of at the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, 2,150 feet underground, in rooms mined from the salt bed. Each room measures 300 feet long by 33 feet wide by 14 feet high. Think the size of a football field. The repository is carved out of a 2,000-foot thick salt bed formed 250 million years ago. Mark Bollinger, manager of DOE's Carlsbad field office, takes a look at 25 years of progress in this report.
This year, the United States Department of Energy's Waste Isolation Pilot Plant celebrates a quarter century of waste emplacement operations. Remotely located in southeastern New Mexico's Chihuahuan Desert, WIPP is the nation's only deep geological repository for defense-related transuranic waste. The need for WIPP began during the Cold War era. The U.S. faced an emerging question: how to keep the threat of defense-related nuclear waste safely isolated from people and the environment. The answer is laid nearly a half-mile below the Earth's surface, deep inside the ancient Salado Salt Formation, an enormous geological remnant of the long-vanished Permian Sea. By the late 1950s, the National Academy of Sciences identified deep salt deposits as the most promising method of disposal. And in the late 1970s, Congress authorized WIPP to demonstrate safe waste disposal. The massive and unprecedented undertaking of constructing WIPP began in the early 1980s. Teams of engineers, scientists, geologists, miners, and trade workers successfully completed construction of the first-of-a-kind facility by the decade's end. During the 1990s, the federal government, the state of New Mexico, and local surrounding communities reached consensus on the permits, rules, and regulations that would guide WIPP's national mission. Then, on March 26, 1999, WIPP received its first transuranic waste shipment from Los Alamos National Laboratory. Soon, shipments from the Idaho National Laboratory and the Rocky Flats Environmental Technology Site followed as WIPP set out on its journey to enable legacy waste cleanup throughout the nation. For decades since, WIPP has been instrumental in the cleanup and closure of over 20 DOE sites across the nation. Today, WIPP remains a cornerstone in the Department of Energy's environmental cleanup and national security missions, instructing the world on the safe construction and operation of a nuclear waste geological repository. WIPP's proud history of national service carries on through nearly 1,500 federal and contractor employees safely characterizing, packaging, shipping, receiving, and emplacing waste into the underground repository. Modern scientific mining techniques and engineering know-how are leading the way to ensure the underground repository remains capable and ready. On the surface, significant infrastructure upgrades are underway. This includes a massive construction project to modernize the repository's air ventilation and filtration system. And likewise, investments are being made to control systems, site utilities, and facilities to prepare WIPP for a strong future built on the core values of safety and quality.
On behalf of the Department of Energy, I congratulate the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant and its amazing workforce on 25 years of critical mission delivery. Thank you for your dedicated service to our national security and our environmental cleanup missions.
We'll be back with more after this from Fluor. As the Gone Fishing Nuclear Report looks back at 25 years of WIPP operations, we had the opportunity to sit down with DOE Carlsbad Field Office Manager Mark Bollinger and two other senior WIPP managers to discuss WIPP's accomplishments and the vital role it continues to play in supporting DOE's cleanup mission. The WIPP facility is operated by Salado Isolation Mining Contractors, or SIMCO, EM's management and operations prime contractor. Well, our guests today are three officials from the Waste Isolation Pilot Project in New Mexico. We have the manager of DOE's field office, Mark Bollinger, manager of the Carlsbad field office for the Department of Energy. Tammy Hobbes is joining us, vice president and senior WIPP operations manager for SEMCO, which is DOE's operating contractor at the WIPP project. And Brandon Jones, Deputy Capital Assets Project Manager for something called the Safety Significant Containment Ventilation System, which is the new underground air system that's being commissioned at WIPP. So welcome to all of you. I'm glad to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for being here. Mark, let's start with you. EM announced recently that WIPP had recorded its best shipment season in 10 years in 2023. Tell us what that's all about and what made the year so good last year.
Well, really what we're talking about there is in terms of the absolute number of shipments we get. We count our success in a number of ways. First of all, safety, but second of all, the amount of shipments we receive in a year. During the COVID years, we managed to keep working. 3 years, we managed to keep the doors open, do it safely, and in place waste at roughly 200 shipments a year. And last year, we were able to get nearly 500. So you can see that we've greatly increased our ability coming out of COVID and some other changes that allowed us to really make some real progress last year.
I just wanted to say from the SEMCO perspective, it was a really great fiscal year for us. We actually transitioned into that contract last February, and this is actually my year anniversary. So I am proud to have been at the WIPP site for a year. And following that transition, we really hit the floor running. As Mark said, we increased our shipments by over 50% for the year, but we also increased our mining capacity, which is, the preparations that we need for future emplacement activities, by almost 35%. And with those kinds of increases in production, as Mark said, safety is always our focus, and our injury rates stayed the same and actually went down a little bit with almost double production.
Well, the numbers that I have show that you received 489 shipments in 2023, and that's the highest number that you've gotten since 2013, when you received 724 shipments. A year after that, in 2014, WIPP experienced an underground salt truck fire and a separate radiological release that actually closed down the waste operations for a period of time. I'm wondering if your performance in 2023 indicates that WIPP has completely recovered from those events and that you're moving forward.
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, absolutely. We've learned a lot of lessons from those two separate events in 2014. We've made a lot of changes in our process and procedure. We've also, implemented a culture which says we cannot move faster than the speed of safety. And by that, I mean that we need to make sure that everything we do takes safety first and foremost. And if we can do it safely, we can emplace more waste. But we need to move at a very deliberate pace that makes sure we maintain multiple, defense and depth structure so that we are safe in everything we do. Tammy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to say, I think we have completely recovered, but we are always going to be in a state of continuous improvement. And in regards to the lessons learned discussion, I think it's important to point out that we learned lessons here at the WIPP site. We changed our processes here on site, but we also spent a lot of time focusing on the requirements from the very start of when waste is being generated across the complex. And we implemented a lot of lessons learned at our generator sites, our waste generator sites, and in the certification process that we use to get the waste here to WIPP. And the bottom line to me is, with the changes we made, we really know our stuff. We really know everything about the waste as it's being generated at a site. packaged, shipped here in the casks, and then placed underground. So the lessons learned that have been implemented since 2014, I don't want to say slow down the process, but as Mark said, it makes us more deliberate. And working at the speed of safety is obviously, as an operations manager, that's one of the things I really love to hear from my customer.
Well, you started operations there in 1999, and you're celebrating a real milestone this year on your 25th anniversary of operations. You've been in business for a quarter of a century. Tell me about your safety record over that period of time. What's that been like? How would you characterize safety over the entire operational period?
You know, as a pilot plant, I would say that, you know, our record is absolutely amazing. And I think, you know, we're going to really celebrate this 25 years of waste and placement this year. And one of the reasons we can celebrate is because we have 25 years of excellent performance. You know, the rest of the world looks at us like a pilot plant because we're learning lessons every day. We do research and we continue to learn. And what they've learned is that you can do it safely. We have proven that you can transport waste safely. And Tammy can talk a little bit about, you know, our amazing safety record, and especially with respect to the transportation of those wastes.
So I think when I think about transportation of nuclear waste across the highways of the United States, I'm really proud to say that since the start of this program, we have over 17 million miles traveled safely with no incident. And I think it's, you know, really exceptional when you think about, number one, how long those roads are and how long 17 million miles are. How many times to the moon did we say, Mark?
Many
times to the moon and back across the United States without incident. And that is because of how we build safety into the way we do the job. We start actually at the very beginning with the containers that we use for packaging waste, both the packages and the casks that we use for shipping across the United States. Those packages and casks go through somewhere between 3 and 10 years of intense testing, and they're tested in every kind of hypothetical accident condition that we can imagine to show that as they're being transported across the United States, that anything that happens to them, the people in the area will be protected. And then that continues on into what we do here at the site as far as building safety into our processes for handling that waste, and the long-term planning that we go into how the mine is actually designed for safety for something close to 10,000 years. And then it ends with the actual personnel safety. And the fact is we strive for zero injury. We believe people should go home the same way they came to work every single day.
You know, Mike, we do something that nobody else in the world does. We run a nuclear facility and we run a mine operation. And our numbers for safety compared to any mine operation are, you know, off the charts. We do things in a very, very safe manner. And so we're very proud of our mining record of safety as well as our nuclear operation safety.
Well, let's talk about the mining for just a minute. You store the waste underground in panels, and you're now mining panel 11 to create more underground storage capacity. And I wonder, these are massive areas, up with 7 rooms, 14 feet high. I wonder if you could give us a fuller description of what a panel is and what's involved in mining a panel.
I'll try to describe how we get down to a panel. First, at the surface, we have mining hoists, which is another name for an elevator. We go down 2,150 feet into the salt, where we've got over 1,000 feet above us and 1,000 feet of salt below us. So we're really in a huge salt layer right in the middle of it. And then we come out in that layer, and we call that the operational layer. And then we go through tunnels, which in our terms are called drifts. and those drifts lead to these large panels. These panels are made in salt because over time the salt will encapsulate. And as somebody said, Mother Earth will be hugging the waste for many thousands of years. And so we create these panels, which are actually really large caverns. And Tammy can give you a little bit of idea how big they are.
Okay, so as Mark said, a panel, and we're on panel 8, actually has 7 rooms where we emplace the waste for the final disposal. Those rooms actually look almost exactly like a football field. They're about as long as a football field and almost as wide as a football field and 14 feet tall. Those rooms, and you might think this is kind of girly way to look at it, but they're actually, the mine is very pretty. If you think about going to a store and seeing a Himalayan salt lamp that a lot of people like to buy for their, their health purposes, our mine looks like that. So it's pink and white, sparkly, and actually really large.
Well, you said you're working in panel 8 right now, yet you're mining panel 11. How long does it take to dig a new panel out of salt? And talk a little bit about why you're working as far ahead as panel 11 right now. What's the reason for that?
Yeah, so Mike, you bring up an interesting point. We've somehow jumped from 8 to 11. So the panel 9 and 10 were not the traditional panels. They were using the drifts or the tunnels in between all the panels. We kept the opportunity to use those hallways, if you will, for waste storage. Now, panel 9 we've given up on because it's so old and it's difficult to maintain the structure there. Panel 10 is still an option for us if the state of New Mexico would like us to use that, or we can make arguments that we need to use that space for certain wastes. So panel 10 is still a possibility, but the more traditional panel structure, the next panel will be panel 11. And what the big deal about us doing that, it's the first time we've mined out or started the mining out of a new panel in over a decade because of the incidents of 2014. So we're very happy that we've gotten started on mining on panel 11, and Tammy can tell you a little bit about how long it takes to get that ready.
Yeah, and with that discussion that we're just starting to mine a new panel, I think it's important to point out, I mentioned before that there are 8 panels in the mine to date. 7 of those panels have been fully closed, so that means that we no longer have any access to them. We're working in panel 8 and we're starting to mine panel 11. The mining of panel 11 will take approximately 3 years. That work is done over that period with a continuous miner, and it kind of, if you think about it, looks like somebody digging a tunnel. Once they get done with the basic structure of that panel, then the hard work really starts. We have to do the ground control, which is the system that we put in place to make sure that the salt stays where we want it to stay while we're working on it. And to do that, we install over 15,000 bolts in the ceiling and in the walls. And then we have to bring in power, lighting, and communications. That 3-year process is timed so that as soon as the miners are done with their step, I'm ready to move in and start bringing the waste in for disposal. So it takes about 3 years to build a panel, and it takes me about 3 years to fill a panel with waste.
Well, mining in panel 11 was approved by the New Mexico Environment Department, which is your state regulator there. And it was as part of a 10-year extension of WIPP's operating permit. One of the officials at DOE called this a great demonstration of how open dialogue and communication with regulators and stakeholders can help mission success. I'd like for you to talk about your relationship with your regulators. Has it changed or become more intense since 2014, or do you consider it more of a partnership?
Well, the relationship is still one of a regulator and a regulated entity. So fundamentally, it hasn't changed. But certainly, we are in a partnership to help clean up America. We've participated in cleaning up 22 sites around the country. And so what happened last year in our permitting process was truly remarkable in that the regulator, the WIPP family, and the stakeholders that have concerns about WIPP all came together at the negotiating table. And in 1 week in June, they all agreed to the parameters of a new contract. And that kept us out of court. And normally every action we take can be very litigious. So it was amazing for folks to come together to agree that more communication with the public is a good thing, to prioritize legacy waste is a really good thing, to make sure we continue to emphasize safety is a really good thing. So we all came together. We did an amazing job of negotiating, and we're very pleased that these panels 11 and 12 are approved as replacement panels for some of the space we lost in panel 9 and some of the other panels over time. And it really set a great precedent. We talked to Secretary Kinney last week in Santa Fe, and he also said the same thing, that it really sets an example of how you can get along and work very well together. Tammy, did you want to add something?
No, I would like to say that the work that we see from the operational perspective on that permit and the changes that were made help us have a more efficient operation. We are always glad to host the regulators when they come for their visits. And I think, as Mark mentioned earlier, we have our work with NMED, but we also work with MSHA, which is the mining regulator. And we've seen a real improvement over the last year with our ability to address the concerns from that regulator in a rapid method. And I think that's really working to improve our relationship both with the state and with the MSHA.
Well, another important effort that you have underway there now is commissioning of your new large-scale ventilation system. It's called the Safety Significant Containment Ventilation System, and it's the largest one in the DOE complex. I'd like to know what the status of this commissioning is, and when will the new system be fully operational?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, this is a very, very important system. I want everyone to know that in the mining business, which we are in because we are at 2150 in depth, air is everything you can imagine. It is our lifeblood, right? You have to have good, fresh air for all the miners and when you're running equipment, you have to have a large amounts of fresh air. And so this system is a great investment on behalf of the American people to operate this mine safely and efficiently for years to come. So SSEVS is going to give us a whole amount of wonderful fresh air in that underground. And Brandon can tell you about where we're at with it and what it will do.
So with project commissioning, we're around 20% complete with overall project commissioning. Right now, one of the goals of last year was to start commissioning by the end of the year, and we were able to achieve that goal in September timeframe, which was a secretary goal. That commissioning started on the electrical systems in the salt reduction building and then bled over into the new filter building. Just as of recent, in the last 30 days, we've commissioned our plant air system. That's all the compressed air lines between the two buildings, salt reduction building and new filter building. And we're moving into more of our electrical components for our Division 40 control panels. There's redundancy layers built. I know safety has been keyed on in operations as well as in true pack and storage and transportation. We build that same safety process in our commissioning activities. Prior to any commissioning activities, construction work packages are signed off complete, verifying checkouts of components, verification prior to releasing actual press up or energization activities inside the plant. And those activities have been moving very well, and our commissioning completion date is targeted at 8/26 of this year, August 26, 2024.
And what's the percent complete of the entire project?
Entire project is 83%.
83%.
Okay.
And just as a follow on to that, as Brandon says, commissioning is nearing completion in August. And then we follow that on with the operational readiness review process to make sure that the operations team can take that fully commissioned system operational in a hazard category 2 nuclear facility. That actually is a lot of coordination between a large number of groups on site. So we have to train about 500 people on this new system. In addition to, writing all the procedures and support documentation that's required to underpin the way we're going to operate that facility.
Brandon, what benefits do you expect to realize from this new system? How will it be an improvement over what you have now?
Well, one thing in the new filter building for all of the filtered air, there's 22 HEPA filter duct banks that's being added and optimized from our current system. That consists of 33 pre-HEPA filters and actual 36 HEPA filters for a total of 72 filters in each individual duct bank. As well as the SRB salt reduction building contains salt reduction units. There's 6 salt reduction units that contain a demister and a deduster that extracts the salt particulates from the air, as well as dehumidifies or removes the air moisture from the air as well. That is a first of a design kind and an addition from changing the configuration of current plant designs. Which will reduce PM and maintenance on our HEPA filters and increase efficiencies on our HEPA filter systems.
I think that, Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, but that is like a 75% increase for us, right?
Correct.
No, a 400% increase.
400% increase, 75% increase total for each of the 6.
Okay.
You mentioned the salt reduction building and filtering the salt-laden air coming from the underground. Is there any safety hazard or health concern associated with workers being in a salt-laden environment like that?
No, the salt is actually considered in many parts of the world to be actually a healthful atmosphere. You can pay a pretty penny to go, I think it's in India, to a salt mine and breathe that air for health purposes. Notwithstanding that, our real concern about salt is what it does to our filters. You want to add to that?
Correct. So the salt reduction units, when they extract the salt particulates, they go over to a series of condensate tanks and are eventually let out to brine water storage tanks, which eventually make its way into the 2 evaporation ponds. Prior to the release of these release of the water into the ponds, there's a chemistry lab that takes samples and routine results for chemical results before it's released into the environment. But the biggest optimization piece, as Mark mentioned, is prior to the air being passing through the HEPA filters, all of these contents and these salt particulates, as well as the moisture, is extracted from all of the filtered air, which increases efficiency of our filtered systems.
Well, let's talk for a minute about why why the waste is being stored in salt formations. This has to do with the behavior of salt and its ability to close in over time and encapsulate the waste. Mark, you referred to that earlier. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works and why salt is such a good medium for waste disposal?
Yeah, I think some of the history of it's fascinating in that, we're celebrating 25 years of emplacement this year, and Sandia National Lab will be celebrating 50 years of working on a project to be a deep geologic repository in salt. So, in the 1950s, I believe there was studies that said that salt is the perfect solution for this because it does move and it does encapsulate the waste. So we have computer models that will show that a panel or a room, full of waste will, over the next, 100 years, everything will start to encapsulate and capture that waste in a small sort of flattened puck over time. And so that plastic nature of the salt is perfect for encapsulating everything right in that room. And so what we do with EPA is we study what could happen over many thousands of years to that puck. And And we're able to show through computer modeling and continuous studies of the underground and the nature of the chemistry in the underground and the nature of our waste that for at least 10,000 years, this system will be safe. So it's an amazing media that has been known for many, many years as a perfect solution for this waste problem.
Well, the salt encapsulates the waste, keeps it from moving, keeps water away from it, and basically isolates it from the environment essentially forever. Is that right?
Essentially, that's it, yes. That Permian Sea's been there for hundreds of millions of years. That salt has been there since the sea existed.
You've got about 1,500 workers on the WIPP project, and many of those work in these underground salt environments every day. What's the turnover like in your workforce, and how difficult or easy is it to recruit workers for that underground work?
Well, we have a lot of advantages that help us recruit to this area. First, we have an extremely supportive community. Southeast New Mexico, Carlsbad, Hobbes, they have been extremely supportive of this project from day one. And having experience in the potash mines, folks around here understand how great an environment it is to work in the mine at WIPP in terms of its safety and its cleanliness and the way we take care of people and the way we pay people. So we don't have a huge turnover problem, especially in our underground workers. They're very much a family. They're extremely dedicated to the mission. And so we do very well there. We're also pleased that with Simcoe on board, we've now reached the highest level of employment ever for the WIPP project. So that's great news for Southeast New Mexico. It's great news for the project. It's great news for cleaning up America. We do have the same challenges that small communities around the country have in terms of affordable housing and competing for employees and some of those things. We've invested almost $12 million. We've committed to the local community college to help some of the local folks here prepare themselves for careers that would support WIPP and the mines, the other mines, by learning more advanced trades, learning, welding and health physics and other programs that will really benefit the employees for years to come. So we're making a lot of investments, but we've come out of COVID very well, and we are competing very well, and so we're doing very well.
I just have a couple things to add to that. It's only about 20% of the workforce that you were talking about, of the 1,500 that actually work underground. And on any given day underground, we have between 60 and 100 people underground for 20 hours out of every 24-hour day. And we're, as Mark said, happy to say that we have really good retention of that workforce. They like working in our mine because of our safety culture here. And the way we approach doing the job. I was talking to the mining operations manager this morning, and he said he likes to think of the potash mines that we have in the community around here as the minor league training platform for us, and it gives us a good place to go get our resources from. So I think we're happy to be competitive with those other industries like the mines and the oil industry in the area. We're spending a lot of time on recruiting and improving our presence out on the internet and and in the online forums. I think we had over 10,000 hits on our open jobs site last month, which tells us that people are interested in this mission and coming to work for us here in Carlsbad. So we're excited.
Well, you have every reason to be. As you celebrate your 25th anniversary this year, what do you see ahead for the future of WIPP? There are decades of cleanup work still left to do at DOE sites. Some of the sites are going to be 50, 60 years in being completed. Like Hanford, for example. Do you see a bright future for the WIPP facility and your DOE mission? And let me ask you a kind of a secondary question. When the job's done, how long will the waste that's stored at WIPP need to be under surveillance?
Okay, so there's two very different questions there. The first one is about our future, and that really boils down to one major question. That the original Land Withdrawal Act that created WIPP had a defined volume of waste that we're allowed to take, and it defined the type of waste that we take. And so that's a congressional act, and we can consider that for all practical purposes unchangeable. So our goal is to fill up WIPP with the amount of waste that the Land Withdrawal Act said. And we are less than 50% full, and it's taken us 25 years to get there, 25 years of emplacement. So in placing at a speed of safety, we expect that we will be operational for decades to come in order to fulfill that Land Withdrawal Act mission. So our future is bright. The department recognizes that. That's why we're investing in major capital projects to get air in the underground. We hope to invest in the infrastructure. We already are committed to over $1 billion investment in the plant over a 10-year period. And we hope to increase that so that we can operate very reliably and safely for decades to come. So the future is extremely bright. And for those communities around the country hoping to be able to clean up their sites and move their waste here, we hope to. We think there's every reason to believe we'll have plenty of capacity for many years to come to make sure we can keep cleaning up sites throughout. What happens when we're done and we are full to the Land Withdrawal Act capacity? There is a permitted process where we will go into a multi-year closure activity. And then following that closure activity, let's say that's 5 to 10 years. After that, there will be many decades of monitoring, and we'll probably be involved in a program similar to what the Department of Energy has in a legacy monitoring program at sites throughout the country. So we would go into a long monitoring period. But as you recall from our earlier conversation, the analysis of this repository is such that we can walk away at some point and expect that 10,000 years from now, it will still remain safe.
Well, Mark Bollinger, manager of DOE's Carlsbad field office, Tammy Hobbes, and Brandon Jones, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a very informative discussion, and you have a very important role in DOE's mission, and we're happy to have you as our guest today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world.